I have to stand here, great. I just want to start by saying it's been a privilege and an excellent experience working with Rob and Eric Hoffmeister, who's right back there, two very proactive people in stream management in this town. I've been working in the Esopus Basin since 2003, first with Gary Capella on a restoration project at the Woodland Valley Confluence. So I've been here for almost 10 years working in this basin, and the situation we have right now is probably one of the most progressive, proactive approaches to improving stream stewardship in an area where people and streams are having to occupy a very limited landscape. So I'm going to try to launch right into this. Corey's got a poster of what this looked like right after Tropical Storm Irene. Take a look at the amount of available space underneath the bridge and compare that with what you see today. When we were walking under that bridge after Irene, it was pretty much like this. After the October storm last year, you could sort of get under it. After the December storm, there's a little bit of a stoop, but this flood brought the stream bed up at least 2 to 3 feet. And I want to talk to you about a little bit about why that happened here and the challenge the town faces with the recurrent flooding. We had 3 floods going down Main Street, Phoenicia, in 10 months. You all should have, or many of you should have, the packet of information that the AWSMP team put together. And if you do, I urge you to look to Site 1 in there right now for some of the photos that are going to kind of give you some perspective on this project. After the October storm last year, in which I think that was the one where there was the trout swimming down Main Street on the front page of Daily Freeman. You know, the town, and we were talking about the need to figure out what could be done here. By the time we were able to get those dialogues going, the December storm happened, and that, I believe it was like 2 days later, several of us were out on this bridge with DEC. Brian Drum was here, and folks from the town, folks from the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program, and everyone saw how that storm event had really built the stream bed up again, and the flood deposits were all over the town. It was very traumatic. 2 months in a row, 2 months, 2 significant flood events that caused damage to businesses as well as to Main Street. We knew something had to be done. We also knew from the previous study that I was involved with in 2005 to 2007 that the biggest problem was this bridge. The bridge is too small for the stream. It cannot pass some of the higher flood waters that come through here. And in all 3 of those floods, the bridge created a bit of a backwater. An additional problem for the recurrent flooding is, for those of you that were with us on the bus, we looked down at Esopus Creek, and if you flip to page 4 in the Site 1 description, you'll see that the Esopus Creek backs water up. And so what happens is Stony Clove flows into Esopus Creek, and Esopus Creek was 5 feet higher than Stony Clove was during this flood event. So it created a backwater effect. Can you hear me if I go like this? I'm going to try because this is not working. So Stony Clove Creek was backed up all the way up through here, slowed down the water, and it caused the sediment to settle out, which built the bed up, which reduced the capacity to carry the water through. Eric, I believe it broke out at least 2 places about where the firehouse is, and then above that. And in the previous storms, it didn't break out as far up above that as it did here. So we were seeing a situation get worse after Irene. But back to December. We met over at the Sportsman's Alamo for lunch, and we all talked about what can we do. And DEP was fortunate enough to have a contract with a consulting firm called Malone and McBroom, and we were able to provide service to the town to quickly do some modeling to see if dredging here would work, the removal of sediment. Now, historically, at least 20 years ago, that's how the town used to maintain this section. If you look, again, those of you that can do that, look at that report, you'll see a photo that I took of Phoenicia from the air, right up there, looking down on the fact that when Stony Clove Creek comes out of the mountains, it comes out into a large fan-shaped delta into Esopus. Before the community was here, the stream used to go back and forth, as one channel would fill, it would cut a new channel. Stony Clove has been pushed over to this side of the valley, straightened out. It's not able to do what it would do normally. And the only response it has is to build its bed up with sediment. And there's some photos in there that show that this is a good example of what happens there. So historically, the town would get in, remove sediment, and do it repeatedly. Regulations changed. That was not as available as practice, and eventually it was no longer an approvable practice. But nothing was being done. And so the situation was getting worse, and with the recurrent floods we've been having since the early 2000s, it got to be an untenable situation. So we worked with these engineers to come up with an optimum design for removing sediment, so it wasn't just getting the equipment in and dredging and trying to make the stream too deep or too wide. There's a public perception that what you want to do is create a lot of space in the stream to handle the floodwaters. We've shown with modeling here, as well as with modeling in the Schoharie, that in order to do that, you have to go down so deep that you actually end up reversing the gradient of the stream. It fills up and it ends up flooding anyway. So going too deep or too wide might seem intuitively right, but it turns out it's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You need to optimize that. So with our modeling, we were able to come up with the right amount of material to remove. The reports that you have a photo of the design that shows the shape of the channel, but we wanted to do more than that. We wanted to help push the sediment through the bridge as it was coming through, and that's the structure that you see here. This is called a cross vein or a boulder weir. It's got a line of rocks across the middle, plus these arms of rocks going up the side, and I'll explain those in a moment. But this was more than a dredging project. This was a channel restoration project, redimensioning the channel. It involves removing sediment, so it has that classic element of dredging, but this was really a much more scientific and engineered approach. We worked with the town really quickly to put together a plan, to get an emergency permit in, to get it done, but our modeling didn't show justified cause to get in right away, so we worked through a meeting with DEC and our engineers to come up with an improved design. It took some time. We were able to get, with the town, an Article 15 permit submitted and approved, I believe, in late May, sometime in May. That an Article 15 permit was approved for that design. The work, that second round of design work, was actually funded through a grant from Cornell Cooperative Extension to the town. The town managed that design work with the engineer. So DEP, we were able to sort of get something in motion, but it was the arrangement between Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program and the town that was able to get the design in place that could be approved. The design required a lot of dewatering, a lot of trying to not make any muddy water downstream of the work. So we wanted to wait until the low flow season in August, late August, early September, when we'd have the optimum amount of water for us to be able to do this. We ended up getting the flood of record during, I think we were going to start a week after Irene was planned, and it then became back an emergency situation. And fortunately, though, we could take those plans right off the shelf, and with the assistance of, I don't know how many towns, Eric, 5 or 6 county towns, Ulster County, DPW, DEC, others, we had lines of trucks lining up here with a rather large excavator that was filling them faster. I mean, not even fast enough. We would have lines of them. They were able to take the sediment from here and take it to another site, Miller Road on Beaver Hill, that had been completely washed out. So we were able to actually take care of 2 problems with one project. During that period, that was over the Labor Day weekend. We started on the 3rd. We worked straight through most of September. The only time we stopped was when Tropical Storm Lee came through and sort of arrested the project for a little bit, reset a little bit, and we saw that the bed built back up in that event, so it kind of helped us improve our approach to how we were going to do this. Let's see what else I want to emphasize. So we were able to do this under the emergency conditions, so we were actually able to work in a way that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. by having the equipment in the stream, not having to divert the water around so much, or there was no turbidity contrast. The color of the water coming in was far worse than what you see today. So we were able to optimize that effort. We did change the project a bit. We carried the removal of the sediment all the way down to a surface which had built up. Remember, the water was above, the surface water was above this bridge. It backed up so much that it really built a huge, huge bar. And when the flows came down, Stony Clove bed dropped down about 6 feet down to Ashokan Creek. It built up that much. So we carried sediment removal down to there, finally finished that, and Eric and I were just trying to estimate. We figured over 20,000 cubic yards of sediment is removed from here. If you look upstream when you get a chance, you'll see a bunch of boulders up there opposite the firehouse. That's where we stopped this project. So 20,000 cubic yards or more material removed from this section alone in that 1 month period. Well, we were trying to guess how many dump trucks. We were thinking of it in terms of weeks. 100? Yeah. And this project included funding from the agencies, a lot of time from the town, a lot of volunteer support, community support from the various towns and governments. And it really could not have been done as effectively had everyone not pulled together to take a design that had been in place and get it in under emergency conditions. But this project included more than that removal of sediment. Our modeling showed two things: that this part had been extended out too far and it partially blocked off the bridge. So during high water, the bridge didn't have access to its full capacity. So we modeled pulling the bank back, reaming it in so that there was no blockage during the flood event. And we also found that if we put in this cross vein structure, we might be able to lower the water under the bridge during high water events. The way this works is these boulders that you see coming off the side are ramps that bring the water up, slow the water up, and then force the water to flow into the center of the channel where all that erosive power is deflected from the bank and is diverted into the center of the channel. This structure, the weir that crosses over between these two vein arms, helps induce scour so that you get a scour pool downstream of it, gives you some capacity, also helps pass the sediment through and under the bridge. There's one right here, and you see that breakwater across the middle. It forms like an A. There's one in there as well to increase and induce scour right below the bridge. So we've reduced erosion on the banks and around the pier, the abutments of the bridge, and focused it all to go underneath the bridge so that we can try to maintain a pool there as much as possible. So that's the purpose of this structure. A lot of people were very confused about why we were putting it in upside down, what was it for. So we're hoping to put a kiosk over here, or at least a panel on that explains the history of this project and what it's intended to do. Part of the arrangement with DEC was that we needed to monitor this because this is a controversial practice, putting dredging or channel redimensioning or channel reshaping, whatever euphemism you want to use for sediment removal. So what we've done is we put in cross sections. There's 5 of them from the bridge up. We pound rebar into the stream, put a little yellow cap on it. We set up an instrument to survey from here to there. We get the profile, and in your reports you'll see an example of what that looks like. And we do it repeatedly. And we monitor, is the bed going up? Is the bed going down? We get a flow like we did 2 days ago. Does that bring the bed up or does that cut it down? We get a big flood. What does it do? And what we want to do is monitor whether or not this practice is an appropriate practice in a setting where the natural way a stream would maintain itself would be to fill up here and cut over there. And fill over there, maybe cut back over here and create 2 channels. Because it doesn't get that natural option, it's going to need assistance in handling the sediment that's going to deposit here. So we want to do this based on science and engineering. So far our monitoring has shown that before we put this weir in, a bar was coming right back. in this portion of the channel. It was cutting down on the sides, but it was starting to form a gravel bar right back in the middle of the channel. So when we put this in, we tried to narrow this center channel up, and that's why you see the gravel on either side here, hoping that what would happen is as the floodwaters come up, it would focus the erosion in the center of the channel with some depositions on the sides so that we get a nice, like, inner flood bench to be able to accommodate these floodwaters and keep that bar from forming back up, which causes our erosion on the outside of the bend. The final step of this project was the town installed this rock wall, and so we did lose a bit of the park, but we were able to actually create a pretty good armor in here with this flow deflector, this bank protecting device down here, and our hope is that we're going to be able to see when we get that next flood through here that this has actually helped lower the flood stage and protect the town. It's designed to really only be able to do so during an event like we had last October and December. This would not stop the flooding of the massive flood that we had in Tropical Storm Irene. Those kinds of floods are going to happen. That was the flood of record. It may not be next year. So we have to be prepared for that. But the important thing that we wanted to try to do is help the town with those floods that are most likely to recur more often so that they're not repeatedly getting battered. Is there anything else I should try to cover?
You just mentioned upstream, Chichester, and some of the impact that you follow Stony Clove up.
Okay, Corey mentioned to you how we've been doing quite a lot of work before Irene, and in particular in this valley. Most often, those of you that are familiar with this area, you can come here in the summer. We've not had rain for a while. The Asopus is looking pretty decent, but it's a little brown downstream. You come up to Phoenicia and you see Stony Clove running brown and it's clean above. This is the #1 source of turbidity in the Asopus Basin, this stream right here. And that's for two reasons. Very complicated glacial geology, deposited a lot of clay in there. This is also the steepest stream valley in the eastern Catskills. And in these kind of flood events that we've been having, with the fact that much of the valley floor is occupied by road and development, the stream has been pushed up against the sides of the mountains and is constantly eroding into those glacial deposits and creating this chronic source of sediment. There's one site that we know is the primary source. You can go up above it in the summer and it's clean coming in, and it's brown coming out, and that's in Chichester, a massive 1 kilometer section of stream that's in contact with a lot of failures, large hill slope landslides that are adding sediment constantly. We've been working with the district and those engineers Malone and McBroom to do a design to stabilize that section. That was our project scheduled for September of this year, which ended up getting set aside while these guys were helping the town respond to the damages in Olivria and throughout the area we're going to go see later today. We're still on target for doing those projects. They're important to New York City for water quality. We really want to try to mitigate this chronic source of turbidity, and we know there's one area that we can go and possibly have an impact on that. And so we're going to continue to do that. But it's also not only a source of the suspended sediment, it's a source of the cobble and gravel and stuff that's slowly filling the system in. So rather than constantly coming in and having to remove sediment, if we can start to manage the sources of the sediment, and we can take care of the cause of the problem rather than the symptom of the problem, our program could be more effective. So that's some of the challenges we face just in this one small part of the watershed. Anything else?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned on the bus how the stream isn't fixing itself, and that's even more true as you go upstream. There's areas up there that are just beginning to erode. I could take you to these sites, or have been eroding for the last 10 years, and they haven't fixed themselves. One of them we've named the Bowl of Doom just because how big it is and how much material from the mountain continues to slide into the creek. That's all that glacial lake clay that Danny was mentioning, and now we're seeing it come down here. Not just the clay, but the sediment. The stream is down cutting, it's taking it out, and it's depositing the material here, causing so much of these issues that we're seeing here. So part of watershed management, part of our challenges, as Danny mentioned, is not only to treat the symptoms down here, but try to go farther upstream and try to get at the causes of what is causing all this.
I was going to add one last thing, and this is for the folks that were kind of upset to see the sediment removal here. If you take a look at that photo, it doesn't quite do it justice, but the habitat quality here was quite poor prior to this project. One of the things that you get out of putting these kind of structures in is far superior habitat to what we had before. We were seeing this system just basically lock up, fill in not only with sediment removing any kind of bed form, it was also filling in with the fines that were embedding that material and removing macro invert habitat. So our hope is that this is multi-objective. There's benefits to the town, and we're hoping there's benefits to the aquatic ecosystem with this kind of approach. So that was a big part of why we wanted to get involved and make sure that when we mess with a creek, we do so as optimally as possible and with as minimal damage, and hopefully with some benefits beyond just trying to reduce flood damage. Yeah, anybody have questions?
So what?